The C-130's ram dropped, and Adrian Kasongo stepped onto Afghan soil for the first time in 3 years. She had promised herself she would never come back. She had promised herself the killing was over. But her little brother was stationed at Forward Operating Base Khorasan, and when Toby asked her to visit, she could not say no. What Adrian did not know, what nobody on this base knew, was that within 48 hours every promise she had made to herself would be broken. The heat hit her like a wall. Dry, familiar. The kind of heat that carried dust into your lungs and memories into your mind whether you wanted them or not. She adjusted the strap of her civilian contractor bag and moved down the ramp with the other passengers, keeping her eyes forward while her peripheral vision cataloged everything. 3 guard towers visible. 2 soldiers at the gate looking bored. A gap in the concertina, a wire near the motor pool that someone should have fixed weeks ago. Old habits. She was supposed to be done with old habits. Before we continue with Adrienne's story, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Perhaps you have family serving overseas right now, or maybe you have experienced that nervous excitement of visiting someone you love in a distant place. The checkpoint line moved slowly. Contractors shuffled forward, grumbling about the delay, checking phones that barely held signal this far from civilization. Adrienne waited in silence. She had learned patience in places far more uncomfortable than this. The young soldier at the gate was struggling. She could see it in his hands, the way they fumbled with the ID scanner, the sweat on his forehead that had nothing to do with the temperature. Private First Class, according to his rank. Baran, according to his name tape. He could not have been more than 19. The contractor ahead of Adrian slammed his passport on the counter. "Where is your supervisor?" the man demanded. "I have been standing here for 15 minutes. This is ridiculous." Private Baran's hand shook harder. He tried to explain that the system was running slow, that he was doing his best, but his voice cracked and the words came out wrong. Adrian stepped forward before she could stop herself. She placed a gentle hand on the contractor's arm. "Sir," she said calmly, "this young man is doing his job in 100-degree heat so that people like us can visit safely. I think we can spare him a few extra minutes." The contractor sputtered, but said nothing more. He grabbed his cleared credentials and stormed through the gate. Private Baran looked at Adrian with something like gratitude. "Thank you," he said quietly. "It has been a long day." Adrian smiled. "Every day out here is long. You are doing fine." She handed over her identification. Baran processed it with steadier hands now. His eyes flickered to her credentials. Logistics coordinator. Civilian contractor. Approved family visit. "Your brother is Specialist Kasongo," Baran said. "IT section. He talks about you sometimes. Good things, I hope. He said you used to be Army. Said you were the toughest person he knows." Adrian kept her expression neutral. Little brothers exaggerate. Baran handed back her credentials, and something in his eyes suggested he did not quite believe her. "Welcome to FOB Khorasan," he said. She walked through the gate and felt the base swallow her. It was smaller than she expected. Cramped prefab buildings arranged in clusters. Generators humming. The distant thump of a helicopter somewhere beyond the perimeter mountains. 400 personnel, according to the briefing documents. A remote outpost in Zabul province, far from the major operations, far from reinforcement, far from anywhere that mattered to the generals making decisions in air-conditioned offices. Adrian had seen bases like this before. Forgotten places where soldiers waited for something to happen, hoping it never would, knowing eventually it would. She made her way toward the IT building, her heart beating faster with each step. 18 months since she had seen Toby in person. 18 months of video calls with bad connections and letters that said everything except what mattered. He did not know the truth about why she left the Army. He did not know about the missions that still visited her dreams. He only knew that his big sister had served, had done something important, and had come home different than she left. The IT building was a squat concrete structure with too few windows and a door that needed oiling. Adrian pushed it open and stepped inside. And there he was. Toby Kasongo sat at a desk cluttered with cables and equipment, his glasses perched on his forehead, squinting at a monitor like it had personally offended him. He was taller than she remembered, lankier, still had that same eager energy that made him look like he was about to bounce out of his chair at any moment. He looked up, his face split into a grin so wide it hurt to look at. "Addie," he shouted, and then he was across the room and his arms were around her, and she was holding her little brother for the first time in 18 months. And for one perfect moment, nothing else mattered. "You made it," Toby said into her shoulder. "I cannot believe you actually made it. Did you think I would miss the chance to see my favorite brother? I am your only brother, which makes you my favorite by default." She pulled back, holding him at arm's length, studying his face. "You look good, Toby. Tired but good." He laughed. "Everyone looks tired here. It is part of the uniform." They talked for a few minutes. Small things, safe things, the food in the dining facility, the unreliable internet, the sergeant who snored so loud the whole barracks could hear him. Toby's words tumbled over each other in that familiar way, filling every silence, afraid that if he stopped talking she might disappear. But Adrian was only half listening. Her eyes kept drifting to the window, to the perimeter beyond, to the mountains rising in the distance like broken teeth against the sky. Something felt wrong. She could not identify it, could not name it, but the feeling was there, crawling along her spine like a warning she had learned never to ignore. Toby was still talking when she turned back to him, his smile bright and oblivious. And she forced herself to smile too, because he did not need to know. Not yet, maybe not ever. But as the sun began its descent toward the western ridgeline, casting long shadows across the base, Adrian Kasongo could not shake the certainty that she had not left the war behind. The war had been waiting for her. Toby insisted on giving her the full tour. Every building, every shortcut, every corner of the base he had made his home for the past 11 months. He walked with a bounce in his step, pride radiating from him like heat off the sun-baked concrete. "This is the dining facility," he said, gesturing toward a long prefab structure. "The food is terrible, but Sergeant Okafor says that is a military tradition. And over there is the gym. I have been working out more. Can you tell?" He flexed an arm that was still more bone than muscle, and Adrian laughed despite herself. "Very impressive. You'll be bench-pressing Humvees by next month. That is the goal." They walked past the motor pool where mechanics worked on vehicles caked in dust, past the medical station where a medic sat outside, smoking a cigarette, past rows of housing units that all looked identical, differentiated only by the unit numbers stenciled on their doors. Adrian noted everything. The patrol schedule posted on a bulletin board, the ammunition storage facility with only one guard, the communication tower with its vulnerable cable runs exposed along the ground. She said nothing. This was not her base. These are not her soldiers. She was a civilian contractor here to visit her brother, nothing more. But the observations kept coming whether she wanted them or not. Toby led her toward the command building, still talking. The commanding officer is Lieutenant Colonel Ainsley. He is fair, treats everyone with respect. But the operations officer, he paused, and something flickered across his face. Captain Holt is different. Different how? Before Toby could answer, a voice cut across the compound like a blade. "Specialist Kasongo, why are you not at your station?" Adrian turned to see a man striding toward them. Medium height, thick neck, the kind of build that suggested he spent more time in the gym than in the field. Captain's bars on his chest, face arranged in a permanent expression of disapproval. "Sir," Toby straightened automatically, "my sister just arrived. I was showing her around the base. I have permission from Sergeant Okafor to take the afternoon." Captain Holt stopped in front of them, his eyes sliding from Toby to Adrian with undisguised contempt. "So this is the sister, the civilian." He said the word like it tasted bad. Adrian extended her hand. "Adrian Kasongo, Logistics Coordinator with Sentinel Defense Solutions. Thank you for approving my visit." Holt ignored her hand. "I did not approve anything. Colonel Ainsley has a soft spot for family reunions. Personally, I think civilians cluttering up my base is a distraction we do not need." Adrian lowered her hand slowly. She had met men like Holt before. Small men in positions of small power, desperate to feel large. I will try to stay out of your way, Captain. See that you do. He turned his attention back to Toby. And you, I want you back at your station in 1 hour. We have actual work to do here, even if your sister thinks this is a vacation resort. He walked away without waiting for a response, his boots striking the ground like he was trying to punish it. Toby exhaled. I'm sorry about that. He is like that with everyone, but especially with support personnel. He thinks anyone who is not infantry is not a real soldier. Does Colonel Ainsley know how he treats people? Toby shrugged. Holt is good at his job. He keeps the operations running. And out here, that counts for a lot. People put up with the attitude because the alternative is chaos. Adrian watched Holt disappear into the command building. The man moved with the confidence of someone who had never been truly tested. She had seen that walk before, too. It usually preceded catastrophic failure. Come on, Toby said, tugging her arm. Let me show you where you're staying. It is not fancy, but it has walls and a roof, which out here makes it luxury accommodations. The visitor quarters were exactly as Toby described. For walls, a roof, a cot that had seen better decades, and a window that faced the eastern mountains. Adrian set her bag on the cot and looked out at the ridgeline turning gold in the fading light. Toby leaned against the doorframe. You seem distracted. Is everything okay? Adrian turned from the window and forced a smile. Just tired from the travel. It is a long way from anywhere to here. I know this place is not much. Toby's voice softened, but it means everything that you came. After you left the army, I thought maybe you were done with all of this. Done with anything that reminded you of your service. Adrian crossed the room and put her hands on his shoulders. I could never be done with you, Toby. You're my family. The only family I have left. Wherever you are, that is where I want to be. His eyes glistened. He blinked rapidly, embarrassed by the emotion. Yoel, next time, maybe request a visit when I'm stationed somewhere with a beach. She laughed and pulled him into another hug. I will put in the request. After Toby left to return to his duties, Adrian sat on the edge of the cot and stared at the wall. The smile faded from her face. Her hands, steady all day, began to tremble slightly. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. Creased, worn at the edges, handled too many times. 5 faces looked back at her. 5 soldiers in desert fatigues, arms around each other, grinning at the camera like they would live forever. She was one of them. Younger, harder, eyes that had not yet learned to hide what they had seen. The other 4 were dead. Adrian traced her finger across their faces. Dawson, Rivera, O'Yelleran, Chun, her team, her family before Toby became the only family she had left. They had followed her into a building in a city that did not exist on any official map. They had trusted her instincts, trusted her calls, trusted her with their lives. And she had gotten them killed. The official report called it an ambush. Unavoidable. No fault assigned. But Adrian knew the truth. She had missed something. Some sign, some warning, some detail that her eyes should have caught and did not. She put the photograph away, her jaw tight. She had left the army to escape this feeling. Left the violence and the death and the weight of command. She had promised herself she would never hold a rifle again. Never make the calls that determined who lived and who died. But sitting in this small room on this forgotten base, watching the shadows lengthen across mountains that looked too much like the ones in her nightmares, Adrian could not escape the feeling that the universe had other plans. Outside, the evening call to prayer echoed from a village beyond the wire. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the perimeter, something was watching, waiting. Adrian woke before dawn. Old habit. Her body still operated on a rhythm set by years of missions that began in darkness. She dressed quietly and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The base was stirring, soldiers moving between buildings with coffee cups and tired eyes. A few nodded at her as she passed. Most ignored her. Civilians were background noise on a military installation. She walked the perimeter road, staying inside the wire but letting her eyes travel beyond it. The mountains were purple in the pre-dawn light, their peaks jagged against the sky, just beginning to blush with color. Beautiful country, deadly country, the kind of terrain that swallowed armies and spit out bones. The guard towers were spaced too far apart. She counted the seconds it took to walk from one cone of visibility to the next. 18 seconds a blind spot. 18 seconds where a skilled team could move undetected. She noted it and kept walking. Near the motor pool, she found a soldier struggling with a rifle. Young, maybe 20, fumbling with a cleaning rod like he had never been taught properly. His movements were jerky, frustrated, the kind that led to mistakes. Adrian paused. She should keep walking. This was not her business. But she could not help herself. "You're going to scratch the boar if you keep forcing it like that," she said. The soldier looked up, startled. "Excuse me?" "The cleaning rod. You need to follow the rifling, not fight against it." "Here." She held out her hand. The soldier hesitated, then handed over the rifle. Adrian disassembled it with movements so fluid they seemed automatic. Her hands knew this weapon better than they knew how to hold pen. She cleaned the bore with 3 precise strokes, checked the chamber, reassembled everything in under 30 seconds. The soldier stared at her. "How did you learn to do that?" Adrian handed back the rifle. "I read a lot." She walked away before he could ask more questions, but she felt his eyes on her back. Watching, wondering. Stupid. She should have kept walking. The dining facility was half full when she arrived. She grabbed a tray and moved through the line, selecting food that looked marginally edible. Powdered eggs, toast that could double as armor plating, coffee that smelled like it had been brewing since the previous administration. She found a table in the corner and sat with her back to the wall. Another old habit. "Mind if I join you?" Adrian looked up to find a woman standing across from her. African features, close-cropped gray hair, the bearing of someone who had spent decades in uniform. Master Sergeant stripes on her chest. Okafor on her name tape. "Please," Adrian said. Okafor sat down and studied Adrian with eyes that missed nothing. "You are Specialist Kasongo's sister, the logistics coordinator." "That is right." Okafor sipped her coffee. Funny thing about logistics coordinators. Most of them cannot tell the difference between a rifle and a broomstick. But I watched you with Private Mercer just now. You handled that weapon like it was part of your body. Adrian kept her expression neutral. "I spent some time in the army before I went civilian." "Some time." Okafor's tone suggested she knew that was an understatement. "What unit?" "Support." "Nothing interesting." Okafor leaned back in her chair. "I have been in the army for 26 years. I have served with every kind of soldier there is, and I have learned to recognize when someone is hiding something." Adrian met her gaze. "Everyone hides something, Master Sergeant." A long moment passed between them. Then Okafor smiled, just slightly. "Fair enough. But if you ever feel like being less hidden, I am around." She stood, picked up her tray, and walked away. At the door, she paused and looked back. "Welcome to Karasin, Miss Kasongo. I hope your visit is uneventful." Adrian watched her go. The woman was sharp. Too sharp. She would need to be more careful. After breakfast, Adrian found Toby at his station and spent the morning watching him work. He explained the communication systems with enthusiasm, proud of the role he played in keeping the base connected to the outside world. She asked questions she already knew the answers to, letting him feel like the expert. But her mind was elsewhere. The security gaps she had identified were not accidents. They were symptoms. Symptoms of a base that had grown complacent, that had gone too long without contact, that had forgotten what it felt like to be hunted. By midday, she could not stay silent any longer. She found Captain Holt in the operations center, standing over a map table with 2 lieutenants. He looked up when she entered, his face souring immediately. "The visitor quarters are on the other side of the base," he said. "This area is for military personnel only." "I understand, Captain, but I noticed some things during my walk this morning that I thought command should be aware of." Holt's eyes narrowed. "You noticed things? Gaps in the perimeter coverage. The guard tower spacing leaves blind spots along the eastern approach. And the concertina wire near the motor pool has been damaged. Someone should repair it." The 2 lieutenants exchanged glances. Holt's face reddened. "Let me understand this correctly," he said slowly. "A civilian logistics coordinator is going to tell me, a career Army officer, how to run security on my base. I am just sharing observations. What you do with them is your decision." Holt stepped closer, using his height to loom over her. Lady, I do not know what you think you saw out there, but I have been running operations at forward bases for 15 years. This base is secure. The only threat to our operations right now is civilians wandering around where they do not belong, distracting my soldiers and wasting my time. He pointed toward the door. Get out of my operations center. And if I see you anywhere near restricted areas again, I will have your visit privileges revoked and you on the next transport out of here. Are we clear? Adrian held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once and left. Outside, she stood in the harsh midday sun and let the anger burn through her. She had tried. She had done what she could within the bounds of her civilian cover. It was not enough. That night, she climbed to the roof of the visitor quarters and lay flat against the concrete, still warm from the day's heat. She pulled a small pair of binoculars from her bag and trained them on the eastern ridgeline. For an hour, nothing moved. Then she saw it. A flash of light. Brief. Deliberate. The kind of signal that looked like a reflection to the untrained eye, but was anything but natural. She shifted her focus. Scanned the ridge. Another flash, different position. Then a third. Someone was out there, watching the base, communicating. Adrian lowered the binoculars and stared into the darkness. They were being hunted, and no one would listen. Sleep came in fragments. Every time Adrian closed her eyes, she was back in that building. The one that did not exist on any map. The one where everything went wrong. The stairwell was dark. Dawson was on point, Rivera covering the rear. Chun and O'Yelleran flanked her as they moved up toward the third floor. Intelligence said the target was alone. Intelligence was wrong. The first explosion took out the stairs behind them. The second brought down the ceiling. And then the gunfire started, coming from everywhere at once, and Adrian was screaming orders that no one could hear over the chaos. She woke with her hand reaching for a rifle that was not there. The room was dark, silent. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She sat up and pressed her palms against her eyes until she saw stars. Just a dream, just a memory, just a thing that had been killing her slowly for 18 months. She checked her watch. 4 a.m. No point trying to sleep again. She dressed and stepped outside into the cold pre-dawn air. The base was quiet, only the hum of generators and the occasional footsteps of guards on patrol. She walked without destination, letting her feet carry her while her mind tried to outrun the ghosts. Near the northern perimeter, she found Master Sergeant Okafor leaning against a concrete barrier, staring out at the mountains. Cannot sleep either, Okafor said without turning around. Adrian stopped beside her. Unfamiliar beds. Okafor made a sound that might have been a laugh. I have been sleeping in unfamiliar beds for 26 years. That is not what keeps me awake. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the darkness beyond the wire. This base is stretched thin, Okafor said finally. We're supposed to have 600 personnel. We have 400. Half our vehicles need parts we cannot get. Colonel Ainsley sends requests up the chain and gets nothing but promises. Why? Okafor shrugged. Politics. Resources go into bigger operations. Someone in Washington decided this base was not a priority. So we make do with what we have and hope nothing happens before we rotate out. Adrian thought about the flashes on the ridgeline, the gaps in the perimeter, the blind spots she had identified. Hope is not a strategy. Okafor turned to look at her. The moonlight caught the silver in her hair, the lines around her eyes that spoke of decades of hard service. No, she agreed. It is not. But sometimes it is all you have. Another moment of silence. Then Okafor spoke again, her voice lower. I made some calls yesterday, after our conversation in the dining facility. Try to find out more about the logistics coordinator who handles a rifle like a special operator. Adrian kept her expression still. And what did you find? Nothing. Okafor's eyes were steady. Your file is clean. Too clean. The kind of clean that happens when someone with authority wants information to disappear. Adrian said nothing. I do not know who you really are, Okafor continued, and I am not going to push. But I've been doing this long enough to recognize someone who has seen the worst of what humans can do to each other. Whatever you are running from, whatever you are hiding, I hope you find peace. She pushed off from the barrier and walked away, leaving Adrian alone with the mountains and the memories. Dawn broke slowly, painting the peaks in shades of orange and gold. Adrian watched the light spread across the valley and felt the familiar weight settle back onto her shoulders. She had come here to escape, to pretend she could be someone else, to visit her brother and remember what it felt like to be human instead of a weapon. But weapons did not stop being weapons just because you put them down. The morning brought routine. Breakfast with Toby, who chattered about a software upgrade he was implementing. A walk around the base that confirmed everything she had observed the day before. The flashes on the ridgeline had not been her imagination. Someone was out there, gathering intelligence, counting heads, mapping defenses. She tried one more time. The duty officer was a young lieutenant named Park, barely old enough to shave. Adrian found him in the command building, reviewing patrol schedules. "Lieutenant," she said, "I need to report suspicious activity." Park looked up with the exhausted expression of someone who had heard too many reports about nothing. "What kind of suspicious activity?" "Signaling on the eastern ridgeline last night. Coordinated flashes, 3 different positions. Someone is watching the base." Park frowned. "Did you report this to Captain Holt?" He was not receptive. Park's frown deepened. He glanced toward Holt's office, then back at Adrian. "Look, Miss Kasongo, I appreciate you trying to help, but we monitor those ridgelines constantly. Our sensors would pick up any movement. Your sensors have blind spots, the same blind spots in your guard tower coverage. Someone who knew your patterns could move through them undetected." Park shifted uncomfortably. "I will make a note of your concerns." "A note is the best I can do. Captain Holt runs operations. If he says the base is secure, then the base is secure." Adrian stared at him long enough to make him look away. Then she nodded and left. The day crawled by. She spent it with Toby, trying to be present, trying to focus on the reason she had come. But her eyes kept drifting to the mountains. Her mind kept calculating distances, angles, approaches. That evening, she noticed something else. The local workers who came to the base each day for construction and maintenance, they were not there. The Afghan laborers who usually gathered at the west gate for their shift gone. The chai shop owner who set up his cart near the motor pool every afternoon, absent. Locals always knew. When something was coming, they disappeared. It was a survival instinct honed by decades of war. Adrian found Toby in the dining facility, laughing with a group of fellow specialists. "Toby," she said quietly, leaning close to his ear, "I need you to do something for me." He looked up, his smile fading at her expression. "What is wrong?" "Maybe nothing, but I want you to keep your sidearm with you at all times. And if anything happens, anything at all, you find the most solid building you can, and you stay there until I come for you." "Addie, you're scaring me." She squeezed his shoulder. "I am probably being paranoid, but promise me." He swallowed. "I promise." She kissed his forehead and walked away, feeling his worried eyes follow her out the door. That night, she did not even try to sleep. She sat by her window, binoculars in hand, watching the ridgeline. At 3 a.m, the first mortar round hit the motor pool. The explosion lit the sky orange, and Adrian was already moving before the sound finished echoing off the mountains. It had begun. The second mortar hit the communications tower. The third struck somewhere near the barracks. Adrian counted the intervals between impacts. Professional. Coordinated. This was not random harassment fire. This was the opening phase of a planned assault. She burst out of the visitor quarters and into chaos. Soldiers scrambled in every direction, some half-dressed, others struggling to find their weapons. Sirens wailed. Officers shouted orders that contradicted each other. A vehicle in the motor pool burned with flames reaching toward the night sky, casting everything in flickering orange light. Adrian moved against the flow of panicked bodies, her eyes scanning for threats, her mind mapping the fastest route to the IT building. To Toby, another mortar round whistled overhead and exploded near the medical station. The shockwave knocked her sideways. She rolled, came up running, ears ringing. Gunfire erupted from the eastern perimeter. Not the disciplined crack of American rifles, but the distinctive chatter of AK-47s. Multiple weapons. Dozens of them. They were inside the wire. Adrian changed direction, cutting between buildings, staying low. She passed a young soldier crouched behind a concrete barrier, frozen, his rifle shaking in his hands. His face was pale with terror. She grabbed his shoulder. Breathe. Find your sergeant. Follow orders. You'll be okay. He nodded without really seeing her, but his grip on the rifle steadied slightly. She pushed him toward a group of soldiers forming up near the command building and kept moving. The IT building was 300 meters away. 300 meters of open ground, burning vehicles and incoming fire. She ran. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet. She zigzagged, using every piece of cover she could find. A concrete barrier, a parked Humvee, a stack of supply crates that splintered as rounds punched through them. She made it to the IT building and threw herself through the door. Inside, Toby was crouched behind his desk with two other specialists, their sidearms drawn, their faces tight with fear. Addie. Toby's voice cracked with relief. Thank God. She crossed to him, grabbed his face in her hands, looked into his eyes. Are you hurt? No. We heard the explosions and took cover. What is happening? The base is under attack. Full assault, not just mortars. They breached the eastern perimeter. One of the other specialists, a woman with corporal stripes, looked at Adrian with wide eyes. Breached? How? We have sensors patrols. Adrian did not answer. There was no time for explanations. No point in saying I told them this would happen. She moved to the window and peered out. The eastern side of the base was chaos. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like deadly fireflies. She could see figures moving between buildings, some in American uniforms, others in the mismatched clothing of insurgent fighters. The defenders were scattered, disorganized. No unified command, no coordinated response. Holt's precious security protocols were failing in real time. We need to move, Adrian said. This building is not defensible. Move where? Toby asked. Anywhere with better walls and fewer windows. She pointed north. The supply warehouse. Concrete construction, limited entry points. We go now. She led them out the back door, keeping low, moving fast. The sounds of battle surrounded them. Screams, explosions, the endless stutter of automatic weapons. They were halfway to the warehouse when she saw Private Baran. He was lying in the dirt near an overturned generator, clutching his leg. Blood soaked through his fingers, black in the moonlight. His face was twisted with pain, but he was not screaming. He was trying to drag himself toward cover with his arms. Adrian did not hesitate. She changed course, sprinting to his position. Toby called after her. Addie, wait. She dropped beside Baran and assessed the wound. Through and through upper thigh. Missed the artery, but he was losing blood fast. Miss Kasongo. Baran's voice was thin, shocked. You should not be here. Neither should you. She pulled off her belt and wrapped it around his leg, cinching it tight above the wound. He gasped but did not scream. Good man. Can you move? I do not think so. Then we carry you. Toby appeared beside her, his face pale but determined. The other two specialists flanked them, providing what cover they could with their sidearms. Together, Adrian and Toby lifted Baran between them. He was heavier than he looked, or maybe the weight of the moment made everything heavier. They moved toward the warehouse, every step an eternity. A burst of gunfire stitched the ground behind them. Adrian felt a round pass, close enough to tug at her sleeve. Faster, she commanded. They made it through the warehouse door and laid Baran on the concrete floor. The corporal pulled the door shut behind them while the other specialists searched for medical supplies. Adrian checked Baran's tourniquet. Holding. He would live if they could get him to proper medical care. If any of them lived through this night. Through the warehouse's small windows, she could see the battle continuing. The defenders were rallying in some areas, falling back in others. But there was no coordination, no strategy. Just isolated pockets of resistance being overwhelmed one by one. She heard Captain Holt's voice on someone's radio, barking orders that made no tactical sense. He was directing forces to defend positions that had already fallen, ignoring the sectors where the enemy was actually pushing. He was going to get them all killed. Adrian closed her eyes for a moment. She had promised herself, no more. No more command decisions. No more weight of lives on her shoulders. No more becoming the thing that had destroyed her. She opened her eyes and looked at Toby. At Baran, bleeding on the floor. At the two specialists huddled by the door, waiting for orders that were not coming. She thought about the four faces in the photograph. The four soldiers who had followed her and died. And she thought about the soldiers outside, dying right now because no one who could stop it was willing to try. Toby, she said quietly, I have to go. Go where? Go do what? Well, I should have done the moment I saw those flashes on the ridgeline. She moved to the door, then stopped. Looked back at her brother, her only family, the reason she had come to this place. Stay here. Keep pressure on Baran's wound. Do not leave this building until I come for you. Addie. His voice broke. Who are you? She did not answer. She pushed through the door and ran toward the armory, toward the weapon she had sworn she would never touch again. The promise was already broken. It had been broken the moment she stepped off that plane. Some things could not be buried. They could only be unleashed. The armory was chaos. Soldiers grabbed weapons and ammunition, shouting over each other, no one in charge. A sergeant tried to maintain order, but he was overwhelmed by the desperate press of bodies. Adrian slipped through the crowd like smoke. She knew what she needed. Not the standard M4 everyone was grabbing. Something with reach. Something precise. She found it in the back corner. An M24 sniper rifle, old but well-maintained. Not her preferred weapon, not even close to the custom rifle she had used in her former life. But it would do. She grabbed it along with 3 boxes of ammunition and a tactical vest. No one stopped her. No one even looked twice. In the chaos of battle, one more person arming themselves was invisible. She moved through the base with purpose now, her body remembering patterns her mind had tried to forget. Stay low. Use shadows. Move when others are distracted by gunfire. The North Tower was her objective. Highest point on the base with clear sight lines to the eastern ridgeline. If the enemy had shooters in elevated positions, which they certainly did, she needed to be higher. The tower's ladder was slick with something she chose not to examine. She climbed with the rifle slung across her back, ammunition pouches heavy on her vest. Her arms burned by the time she reached the platform. The soldier who was supposed to be manning the tower was dead. A single round through the forehead. The enemy's snipers had already been at work. Adrian pulled his body aside with a whispered apology and took his position. The battlefield spread out before her like a nightmare, rendered in muzzle flashes and burning vehicles. She could see the entire eastern sector, the breach in the wire, the clusters of enemy fighters moving between buildings. She could also see the ridgeline, and on that ridgeline, half hidden among the rocks, the shapes of men with rifles. Adrian settled into her position, cheek against stock. I'd a scope. Her breathing slowed without conscious thought, her heartbeat steadying to a rhythm she had not felt in 18 months. The first target was 800 meters out, a shooter on a rocky outcropping, his muzzle flash giving away his position every time he fired. He was responsible for at least 2 of the bodies she could see below. She calculated windage, elevation, the slight curve of the bullet over distance. She exhaled. She squeezed. The rifle kicked against her shoulder and the shooter dropped. His body tumbled from the rocks and disappeared into the darkness below. Adrian was already moving to the next target before the first one finished falling. Second shooter, 750 meters. Prone behind a boulder, harder to spot. But she had spent years learning to see what others could not. Another breath. Another squeeze. Another body. Below, the soldiers began to notice. The incoming fire from the ridge was slackening. The impossible shots that had been picking them off had stopped. Someone with a radio was shouting. Sniper in the North Tower. Friendly sniper. Who was up there? No one answered because no one knew. Adrian worked methodically, clearing the ridgeline one target at a time. Each shot bought the defenders below another few seconds of breathing room. Each body that fell was one less weapon aimed at American soldiers. She lost count after the 7th, or maybe the 8th. The numbers did not matter. Only the next target mattered. A burst of automatic fire raked the tower. Someone had figured out where the shots were coming from. Rounds sparked off the metal railing, punched through the plywood walls. She flattened herself against the platform floor and waited for the burst to end. Then she was up again, scope to eye, finding the shooter who had tried to kill her. 1,100 meters. At the very edge of the M24's effective range. Shooting uphill, into wind, with a rifle she had never zeroed. Impossible for anyone without years of elite training. Adrian made the shot. The enemy fighter crumpled. From somewhere below, she heard a voice she recognized. Master Sergeant Okafor, shouting into a radio. Who the hell is in that tower? Whoever you are, you just bought us time. Keep shooting. Adrian kept shooting. The tide was turning, slowly. With the Ridge snipers eliminated, the defenders could move without being picked off. Fire teams began coordinating. Positions were reinforced. The chaos started to become something resembling order. But the enemy was not finished. Through her scope, Adrian saw them massing for another push. 50 fighters at least, maybe more, gathering in a dry riverbed beyond the eastern wire. They were preparing for a final assault, a human wave that would overwhelm whatever defenses remained. And leading them was a man in black, taller than the others, issuing commands with sharp gestures. Even at this distance, she could see the authority in his posture. This was not a foot soldier. This was the commander, Rostami. The name surfaced from briefings she was not supposed to have access to. A warlord who had been consolidating power in the region for years, evading every attempt to neutralize him. He was here, personally leading the assault. Adrian shifted her position, calculating the distance. 1,400 meters. Uphill. Crosswind. With a rifle that was never designed for this range. Her instructors would have called it impossible. Her former teammates would have called it suicide. But Dawson and Rivera and Chun and O'Yelleran were dead. And she was still here, and sometimes impossible was just another word for necessary. She steadied her breathing, felt the wind on her cheek, watched Rostami through the scope as he raised his arm to signal the advance. She aimed not where he was, but where he would be when the bullet arrived. And she fired. The round traveled for nearly 3 seconds. An eternity in which everything could go wrong. Rostami's arm was still raised when the bullet found him. He staggered, looked down at his chest in confusion. Then he collapsed, and the fighters around him froze in shock. Their leader was down. The invincible warlord who had evaded death for a decade was bleeding in the dirt. Adrian chambered another round, but she did not need it. The enemy assault wavered, then broke. Fighters began retreating, dragging Rostami's body with them. Their cohesion shattered along with their commander. Below, American soldiers watched in disbelief as the attack dissolved. In the North Tower, Adrian Kasongo lowered her rifle and let out a breath she had been holding for 18 months. The killing was not over. But maybe, for tonight, enough had been done. The enemy retreat was not a surrender. Adrian knew that even as she watched them fall back through her scope, they were regrouping, not running. Rostami might be down, but whoever took command would rally them soon enough. She had bought time, nothing more. She descended the tower ladder, legs trembling with adrenaline. She no longer had the luxury to feel. The rifle felt heavier now, or maybe she was just remembering how much it cost to carry one. At the base of the tower, she found chaos transforming into order. Soldiers moved with purpose now, establishing defensive positions, tending to wounded, reinforcing the breach in the eastern wire. The panic had been replaced by grim determination. Master Sergeant Okafor intercepted her before she had taken 10 steps. The older woman looked at the rifle in Adrienne's hands, then at her face, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition, not of who Adrian was, but of what she was. "That was you in the tower," Okafor said. It was not a question. Adrian nodded. The shots from the ridge. The one that dropped their commander at 1,400 meters. "That was you." "Yes." Okafor was silent for a long moment. Then she shook her head slowly. "I knew you were hiding something. I did not expect this." "Neither did I." Soldiers were gathering now, drawn by the conversation, by the sight of the civilian woman holding a sniper rifle like she had been born with it. Their faces showed confusion, suspicion, and something that might have been hope. A corporal pushed through the crowd. "Master Sergeant, Captain Holt is calling for all available personnel at the command bunker. He is organizing a counterattack." Okafor's jaw tightened. "A counterattack? With what reserves? We barely have enough bodies to hold what we have." "Those are his orders." Adrian stepped forward. "A counterattack now would be suicide. The enemy fell back to regroup, not to retreat. They will be expecting us to push out. We need to consolidate here, strengthen our positions, wait for reinforcement." The corporal looked at her with obvious skepticism. "And who are you to countermand a captain's orders?" "She is the reason any of us are still alive," Okafor said sharply. "And she is right. Holt is going to get people killed chasing a broken enemy into terrain they know better than we do." "But the captain said—" "I heard what the captain said." Okafor turned to Adrian. "What do you need?" Adrian surveyed the soldiers around her. Tired faces, some wounded, all scared. But they were still standing, still fighting. "I need fire teams at every possible approach. I need the breach in the eastern wire reinforced with everything we have. I need someone on comms trying to reach battalion for air support and medevac. And I need eyes on that ridgeline in case they have more shooters we did not see." Okafor began issuing orders, translating Adrienne's tactical instincts into military commands. Soldiers moved to comply, responding to authority that had nothing to do with rank insignia. Adrian headed toward the supply warehouse, toward Toby. She found him exactly where she had left him, crouched over Private Baran, keeping pressure on the leg wound. His hands were covered in blood. His face was pale but steady. He looked up when she entered, and his eyes went to the rifle first. "Addie." His voice was barely a whisper. "What did you do?" "What I had to." She knelt beside Baran and checked the tourniquet, still holding. The young private was conscious but weak, his skin clammy with shock. "You saved my life," Baran said. "Again. Stop making a habit." She helped Toby to his feet and led him to a corner of the warehouse, away from the others. He stared at her like he was seeing a stranger. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Something I should have told you years ago." Toby waited. "While I was in the army, I was not in support. I was not a logistics specialist or a clerk or any of the things I let you believe. I was a sniper, one of the best they had. I did things that do not exist in any official record, in places that are not on any map." His face showed no surprise. On some level, he had always known. "I left because of what happened to my team. For soldiers who trusted me, who followed me into a situation I should have seen coming. They died because I missed something, because I was not good enough." She felt the old wound open, the guilt spilling out with the words. "I swore I would never pick up a rifle again, never put myself in a position where my decisions could get people killed. I thought if I just walked away, I could become someone else, someone normal. And tonight," Toby said quietly, "tonight I broke that promise. Because you were here, because people were dying, because sometimes who you are is not something you can run from." Toby was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand, heedless of the blood, the grime, the weight of everything she had just confessed. "I am not sorry you broke your promise," he said. "I am alive because you did." Adrian felt something crack in her chest, not breaking, but releasing. A pressure she had carried for 18 months finally easing. "I could not let anything happen to you," she said. "You're all I have left, and you are all I have." Toby squeezed her hand. "So whatever happens next, we face it together. You do not have to carry this alone anymore." The sound of gunfire erupted outside, distant but growing closer. The enemy was coming again. Adrian pulled her brother into a brief, fierce embrace. Then she stepped back, checked her rifle, and moved toward the door. "Stay here," she said. "I will come back for you. I know you will." She pushed out into the night, into the smoke and fire and chaos, her brother's faith warming her back like armor. The battle was not over. But for the first time in 18 months, Adrian Kasongo was not fighting alone. The second wave hit harder than the first. Without Rostami's leadership, the enemy had become something more dangerous. Desperate, furious, they poured through the darkness like water through cracks, finding every weakness in the perimeter and exploiting it. Adrian moved through the base like a ghost, appearing where the fighting was thickest, her rifle speaking with lethal precision. She dropped 2 fighters trying to flank a defensive position near the motor pool, eliminated a machine gunner who had pinned down a squad near the dining facility. Every shot counted. Every bullet found its mark. But she was one person, and there were too many of them. The radio chatter painted a grim picture. Eastern perimeter holding, but barely. Southern approach under heavy pressure. Ammunition running low at multiple positions. Casualties mounting. And then Captain Holt's voice cut through the chaos. All units, this is Holt. I am taking command of the counteroffensive. Alpha and Bravo teams, form up at the motor pool. We push out in 5 minutes. Adrian grabbed the nearest radio. Captain, that is a mistake. They want us to extend beyond our defensive positions. We need to hold the line and wait for support. Who is this? Holt's voice dripped with contempt. Is this the civilian? This is someone who has seen this tactic before. They are baiting you. I do not take orders from contractors. Hold out. The radio went silent. Okafor appeared at her side, her face tight with frustration. He's going to get those men killed. I know. Can you stop him? Adrian looked toward the motor pool, where soldiers were already gathering. Holt stood at the center, gesturing at a map, pointing toward the breach in the eastern wire. His posture radiated confidence, the confidence of a man who had never truly been tested. She could not stop him, not without creating a confrontation that would fracture what little command structure remained. And fractured command in the middle of a firefight meant death for everyone. Get to the southern positions, she told Okafor. That is where they will hit hardest once Holt pulls forces for his push. Hold the line there. What about you? I'm going to try to keep his men alive. She sprinted toward the motor pool, reaching it just as Holt was finishing his briefing. 20 soldiers stood in loose formation, checking weapons, tightening straps. Young faces, scared faces, faces that trusted their captain to bring them back. Holt saw her approach, and his expression hardened. You have no business here, civilian. Those men are walking into an ambush, Captain. At least let me provide overwatch from the perimeter. We do not need overwatch. We need to show these animals that American soldiers do not cower behind walls. Adrian bit back the response she wanted to give. Pride. It was always pride with men like Holt. Pride that saw retreat as weakness. Pride that measured courage and body counts. Then let me come with you, she said instead. Another rifle cannot hurt. Holt studied her for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes. Suspicion, resentment, but also something else. Fear, maybe. The fear of a man who was beginning to realize he was out of his depth. Fine, he said finally, but you follow my orders. One step out of line, and I will have you detained. Understood. They moved out through the breach in the eastern wire. 22 soldiers plus 1 civilian who was anything but. The night swallowed them immediately, darkness pressing in from all sides. Adrienne's senses strained to their limits, searching for the ambush she knew was coming. They made it 200 meters before the world exploded. Gunfire erupted from 3 sides simultaneously. Muzzle flashes lit up the rocks like hellish fireflies. Soldiers dropped. Screams filled the air. Ambush, someone shouted, as if the observation needed stating. Adrian was already moving, pulling a wounded private behind a boulder, returning fire with controlled bursts. She dropped 2 fighters in rapid succession, bought a few seconds of breathing room. Fall back, she yelled, fighting retreat to the wire. But Holt was frozen. He stood in the open, staring at the chaos around him, his pistol hanging limp in his hand. The perfect officer, caught in the perfect storm of his own making. A fighter emerged from the darkness behind him, rifle raised. Adrian pivoted and fired. The fighter dropped 3 feet from Holt's back. Move, Captain. Now. Something broke in Holt's eyes. The arrogance shattered, replaced by the raw terror of a man who had finally met his limitations. He stumbled toward cover, and Adrian turned her attention back to the firefight. She coordinated the retreat through sheer force of will, shouting orders, directing fire, pulling wounded soldiers to safety. 12 of the 20 made it back through the wire. 8 did not. 8 soldiers dead because of one man's pride. In the chaos of the retreat, she lost track of the larger battle, lost track of the defensive positions, lost track of where Okafor had gone, where the enemy was pushing, where the line was weakest. She did not lose track of what mattered most. The supply warehouse, where she had left Toby. She ran. The warehouse door hung open, swinging in a hot wind. Bullet holes pocked the concrete walls. Shell casings littered the ground. Adrian burst through the entrance, her heart stopping in her chest. The 2 specialists who had been with Toby were dead. Baran lay unconscious against the far wall, his face bloody but still breathing. And Toby was gone. Signs of struggle marked the floor. Drag marks leading toward the back exit. Blood that might have been his. They had taken him. The enemy had taken her brother. Adrian stood in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by death, and felt something cold settle into her bones. Not despair, not grief, something older, darker, the part of her that she had buried 18 months ago, the part that had made her legendary in circles that did not officially exist, the part that did not know how to fail, only how to destroy. She checked her rifle, counted her remaining ammunition, walked to the back exit, and studied the drag marks leading into the darkness. They had her brother. They had no idea what they had awakened. Adrian followed the drag marks through the back exit and into the darkness beyond. The trail was sloppy, rushed. Whoever had taken Toby was not concerned with stealth. They were concerned with speed. That told her something. They knew their window was closing. They knew reinforcements would eventually arrive. They wanted leverage, a hostage, something to bargain with when the tide turned against them. They would not kill Toby. Not yet. Not until he stopped being useful. She clung to that thought as she moved through the night. The trail led toward a cluster of abandoned buildings 300 meters outside the wire. Pre-war structures, crumbling and forgotten, perfect for staging an assault or holding a prisoner. Adrian approached from the west, using every scrap of cover the terrain offered. Her breathing was steady. Her hands were still. The fear was there, buried deep, but it could not reach her now. Nothing could reach her now except the mission. Find Toby. Eliminate threats. Get out. Simple. Clean. The way she had been trained. She reached the first building and pressed herself against the wall, listening. Voices inside. 3, maybe 4. Speaking Pashto, too fast for her limited vocabulary, but the tone was clear. Argument. Disagreement. Someone wanted to kill the hostage now. Someone else wanted to wait. She moved to a window, cracked and grimy, and peered inside. For fighters. AK-47s. One stood guard near a doorway leading to an interior room. The other 3 huddled around a small fire, gesturing angrily at each other. Toby was not visible. He was in the back room. Had to be. 4 targets. 1 rifle. No room for error. Adrian calculated angles, distances, timing. The guard by the door was the priority. Take him first, the others would react, but reaction time was predictable. 2 seconds to process, another second to raise weapons. 3 seconds total. She could work with 3 seconds. She moved to the building's entrance, a doorway with no door, just empty hinges and shadows. She steadied her breathing one final time. Then she went in. The guard died before he knew she was there. A single round through the temple, silent except for the suppressed cough of the rifle. The 3 by the fire turned, eyes wide, hands scrambling for weapons. Adrian fired 3 times in 2 seconds. 3 bodies hit the ground. Silence. She crossed the room without pausing, stepping over the dead, moving toward the back room. Her rifle swept the corners, checked the shadows. Clear. The door to the back room was wooden, warped, hanging crooked on its frame. She kicked it open and went through low, ready for anything. Toby sat against the far wall, hands bound behind his back, face bloodied but alive. His eyes went wide when he saw her. Addie. She was beside him in 2 steps, cutting his bonds with a knife she had taken from one of the dead fighters. Are you hurt? Can you walk? I think so. They hit me a few times, but nothing is broken. He flexed his hands, wincing as circulation returned. How did you find me? I follow the trail. She helped him to his feet, keeping one hand on his arm to steady him. We need to move. There could be more of them. They exited the building, and Adrian scanned the terrain. The base was visible in the distance, fires still burning, the sound of sporadic gunfire carrying on the wind. The battle was not over, but it had shifted. The enemy's coordination was failing. They made it 50 meters before the shot came. The round struck the dirt at Adrienne's feet, close enough to spray debris against her legs. She shoved Toby behind a boulder and dropped beside him, rifle up, searching for the shooter. There, on a ridge to the north, a muzzle flash, then another. Someone with a rifle and enough skill to nearly hit a moving target in darkness. Stay down, she told Toby. She studied the ridge through her scope. The shooter was good, but good was not good enough. He was silhouetted against the stars, just barely, a shape that did not belong to the rocks around it. Adrian aimed, breathed, fired. The shape dropped. She waited, counted to 10. No more shots came. Move, she said, pulling Toby up. Stay close, move fast, do not stop for anything. They ran. The base perimeter appeared ahead, the breach in the wire now reinforced with concertina coils and sandbags. Soldiers manned the position, rifles pointed outward, searching for threats. Friendlies coming in, Adrian shouted. Do not shoot. They made it through the wire and into the relative safety of the base. Soldiers stared at them, at the blood on their clothes, at the rifle in Adrienne's hands, at the civilian woman who had just walked out of enemy territory with a rescued hostage. Okafor pushed through the crowd, her face a mixture of relief and disbelief. You found him. I found him. Toby leaned against his sister, exhausted but alive. She saved me. Again. Okafor looked at Adrian with something that might have been awe. The fighting is dying down. Most of the enemy has pulled back. We intercepted radio chatter. Their command structure is in chaos after Rostami went down. Good. Adrian handed her rifle to the nearest soldier. Then let's make sure they do not regroup. She spent the next hour directing the defense, working with Okafor to shore up weak points, redistribute ammunition, and prepare for any final push that might come. But the push never came. By dawn, the last of the enemy fighters had melted into the mountains, leaving behind their dead and their failure. The base had held. Adrian stood at the eastern perimeter as the sun crested the ridgeline, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Beautiful, peaceful, as if the night's horrors had been nothing but a dream. Toby appeared beside her, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, a medic's bandage on his forehead. It is over, he said quietly. Adrian watched the light spread across the valley. The mountains that had hidden death now glowed with the promise of a new day. This part is over, she said, but I had a feeling the hard part is just beginning. The morning brought helicopters. Black Hawks appeared over the eastern ridge, their rotors beating the air into submission as they descended toward the landing zone. Medevac first, carrying away the wounded in a steady stream of stretchers and 4-bags. Then reinforcements, fresh soldiers pouring out with clean uniforms and weapons that had not been fired in anger. Adrian watched from the shadow of the supply warehouse, staying out of the way as the base transformed around her. The chaos of battle was replaced by the chaos of aftermath. Body counts, damage assessments, the grim arithmetic of survival. 37 dead, 62 wounded, a third of the base's strength gone in a single night. But it could have been worse. Everyone knew it could have been worse. Toby found her there, 2 cups of coffee in his hands, his face still bruised but his eyes clear. The medics wanted to evacuate me, he said, handing her a cup. I told them I was staying until my sister left. You should go. Get checked out properly. I am fine, Addie. A few bruises, a headache. Nothing that will not heal. She took the coffee and sipped it. Terrible, as expected, but warm, and that was enough. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the helicopters come and go. People were talking. Toby said finally, about what you did, about the shots from the tower, about you going outside the wire alone to rescue me. Let them talk. They're calling you a ghost, a guardian angel. Some of them think you're CIA or Delta Force or some secret unit they have never heard of. Adrian almost smiled. I am just a logistics coordinator. Toby laughed, a genuine sound that felt out of place amid the destruction. Sure you are. A commotion near the command building caught their attention. Soldiers were gathering, forming a loose semicircle around the entrance. Adrian saw Okafor at the edge of the crowd, her expression unreadable. "What's happening?" Toby asked. Adrian set down her coffee. "I think we are about to find out." They made their way to the command building, joining the crowd. Lieutenant Colonel Ainsley emerged from the entrance, his uniform rumpled, his face lined with exhaustion. But he stood straight, his voice carrying clearly when he spoke. "Last night, this base faced an assault that should have overwhelmed us. We were outmanned, outgunned, and caught by surprise. By every metric, we should have fallen." He paused, letting the words settle. "We did not fall. We held. And we held because of the courage and sacrifice of every soldier who stood their ground. But we also held because of someone who had no obligation to fight at all." Ainsley turned and looked directly at Adrian. The crowd parted, creating a path between them. "Miss Kasongo, would you step forward, please?" Adrian hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to fade back, to disappear, to avoid the spotlight that was now turning her direction. But Toby's hand pressed against her back, gentle but insistent. She walked forward. Ainsley waited until she stood before him, then continued speaking. "I made some calls this morning. Spoke to some people who were very surprised to hear your name. Your file, the real one, is classified at levels I am not clear to access. But I learned enough." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. "Sergeant First Class Adrian Kasongo. Distinguished Marksmanship Qualification. Multiple deployments to locations that do not officially exist. Credited with actions that saved dozens of American lives before you left the service 18 months ago." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Last night, you killed at least 14 enemy combatants, including a warlord who has evaded capture for over a decade. You single-handedly neutralized their sniper positions, coordinated our defense when command structure faltered, and personally rescued a captured American soldier from behind enemy lines." He lowered the paper and met her eyes. "On behalf of this base and every soldier who survived the night, I am recommending you for the highest commendation available. But more than that, I want to say something that the paperwork cannot capture." Ainsley extended his hand. "Thank you. From all of us. Thank you." Adrian took his hand. The grip was firm, genuine. "I did not do it for commendations, Colonel. I know. That is why it matters." She released his hand and turned to face the crowd. Soldiers she did not know looked back at her with gratitude, respect, something approaching reverence. It was uncomfortable, unfamiliar. But Toby was there, grinning despite his bruises, pride radiating from every inch of him. And Okafor stood at his side, nodding slowly, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Maybe this was what she had been running from. Not the violence, not the weight of command, but the connection, the belonging, the terrifying vulnerability of letting people see who she really was. She had spent 18 months hiding, building walls, convincing herself that she was safer alone. One night had torn all of that down. The crowd began to disperse, soldiers returning to their duties, the machine of military life grinding forward. But many paused to nod at Adrian as they passed. Some shook her hand. A few simply said, "Thank you," quiet words that carried more weight than any medal ever could. Baran approached on crutches, his leg heavily bandaged, his face pale but determined. "Miss Kasongo," he said, "I wanted to thank you for everything. You can call me Adrian." He smiled. "Adrian, when I first met you at the gate, I thought you were just being kind. I did not know you were the kind of person who runs toward gunfire instead of away from it. Sometimes I do not know either." He laughed, winced at the pain it caused, and hobbled away, still smiling. Toby appeared at her shoulder. "So what now?" Adrian looked at the base around her. The damaged buildings. The soldiers rebuilding what had been broken. The flag still flying over the command building, tattered but undefeated. "Now," she said, "we figure out what comes next." The formal debrief lasted 3 hours. Adrian sat in a windowless room in the command building, answering questions from officers who had flown in from Kandahar. They wanted every detail. The shots from the tower, the rescue outside the wire, the moment she had put a round through Rostami at 1,400 meters. She gave them what they needed, nothing more. Some questions she could not answer, bound by classifications that still applied even though she had left the service. The officers understood. They had seen files like hers before, files where the black ink told more stories than the visible words. When it was over, she stepped outside into the afternoon sun and found Okafor waiting for her. "Survived the interrogation," Okafor said. "Barely." They walked together through the base, past soldiers clearing debris and engineers patching walls. The work of rebuilding had already begun, the military machine grinding forward as it always did. "I have been thinking," Okafor said, "about what happens when someone like you walks away from all this." Adrian did not respond. 26 years I have served. Seen a lot of soldiers come and go. The ones who leave cleanly, they make peace with what they did. The ones who leave broken, they spend the rest of their lives running from it. She stopped walking and turned to face Adrian. "You were running. I could see at the moment you stepped off that transport. Running from something you thought you could escape by pretending to be someone else. And now I think maybe you stopped running. At least for one night." Adrian looked at the mountains, the same peaks that had hidden death just hours ago. Maybe I just found something worth standing still for. Your brother. My brother. And maybe something else too. Okafor nodded slowly. "Whatever you decide, wherever you go next, I hope you remember something. The weight you carry, the guilt over the soldiers you lost, that does not make you broken. It makes you human. The ones who feel nothing, those are the ones to worry about." She extended her hand. Adrian took it. "If you ever need anything," Okafor said. "A recommendation. A reference. Someone to vouch for the logistics coordinator who turned out to be a one-woman army. You know where to find me. Thank you, Master Sergeant, for everything." Okafor walked away, and Adrian stood alone for a moment, letting the words settle into place. She found Toby in the dining facility, sitting with a group of soldiers who had survived the night. They made room for her without being asked, pulling up a chair, offering food she did not want but accepted anyway. The conversation flowed around her. Stories from the battle, moments of terror transformed into tales of survival. Soldiers processed trauma the way soldiers always had, through dark humor and shared experience. One of them, a corporal with a bandaged arm, turned to Adrian. "Is it true you made a shot at over a kilometer with an M24? 1,400 meters, someone else said. I heard it from the colonel himself." Adrian shrugged. The rifle did most of the work. Laughter rippled through the group. Toby beamed with barely contained pride. A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Captain Holt stood in the doorway, his uniform disheveled, his face haggard. He looked like a man who had not slept in days, which was probably true. The dining facility fell silent. Holt scanned the room until his eyes found Adrian. He stood frozen for a moment, something warring behind his expression. Then he walked toward her table. The soldiers around her tensed. Toby's hand moved toward his sidearm. Holt stopped 3 feet away. His jaw worked, grinding words he did not want to say. "Miss Kasongo," he said finally. His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual arrogance. "I owe you an apology." Adrian waited. "You tried to warn me. About the perimeter. About the ridgeline. About the ambush. And I did not listen. I was so certain I knew better that I got 8 of my soldiers killed." He swallowed hard. "You saved my life out there. When that fighter came up behind me, I froze. I will be dead if not for you." The silence in the dining facility was absolute. "I have already submitted my resignation to Colonel Ainsley," Holt continued. "I am not fit for command. I see that now. But before I go, I needed you to know that I was wrong. About you. About everything." He straightened, something like dignity returning to his posture. "For what it is worth, you are the finest soldier I have ever seen. And I am sorry I did not recognize it sooner." He turned and walked away, leaving stunned silence in his wake. Toby let out a breath. Did that just happen? Adrian watched Holt's retreating back. It happened. One of the soldiers whistled low. "Never thought I would see the day Captain Holt apologized to anyone let alone a civilian. She is not a civilian, Toby said quietly. She never was. The conversation resumed around her, but Adrian was elsewhere, thinking about pride and humility, about the weight of command and the cost of arrogance, about men like Holt who learned too late and men like Rostami who never learned at all, and about herself, about the woman she had been, the woman she had tried to become, and the woman she might still be. Later that evening, she sat with Toby on the roof of the IT building, watching the stars emerge one by one. I spoke to my commander, Toby said. Asked about extending your visit. Adrian raised an eyebrow. And? He said, given the circumstances, you can stay as long as you want. Apparently, saving the base from annihilation earned some privileges. She laughed, a genuine sound that surprised her. I cannot stay forever, Toby. I know, but maybe a few more days? He looked at her with the same hopeful expression he had worn as a child, asking for one more bedtime story. I feel like I just met my sister for the first time. I don't want to say goodbye yet. Adrian put her arm around him and pulled him close. A few more days, she said. I think I can manage that. The ceremony was small by military standards. No marching bands, no rows of dignitaries. Just 200 soldiers standing in formation under a sky so blue it hurt to look at, and a woman who had never wanted recognition receiving it anyway. Lieutenant Colonel Ainsley stood at a makeshift podium, the American flag rippling behind him in the mountain breeze. Adrian stood before him in borrowed dress uniform, feeling like an imposter despite everything she had done. We gather today to honor extraordinary valor in the face of overwhelming odds, Ainsley began. On the night of October 14th, this base was attacked by a force that outnumbered us nearly 3-1. We should have fallen. We did not. And the primary reason we did not is standing before you now. He turned to Adrian. Sergeant First Class Adrian Kasongo, formerly of units whose names I am not permitted to speak, demonstrated courage and skill that defies adequate description. Her actions directly resulted in the elimination of over a dozen enemy combatants, including a high-value target who had evaded coalition forces for more than a decade. She coordinated defensive operations that preserved this base, and she personally conducted a rescue mission behind enemy lines to recover a captured American soldier. Ainsley lifted a small box from the podium. It is my honor to present you with the Army Commendation Medal with Valor Device. This award recognizes your heroism, your sacrifice, and your unwavering commitment to the soldiers of this base. He pinned the medal to her chest. The metal was cold against her skin, lighter than the weight it represented. The formation applauded. Adrian saw Toby in the front row, tears streaming down his face, clapping harder than anyone. She was supposed to say something. She knew that, but the words caught in her throat, tangled with memories and grief, and something else she could not name. She cleared her throat and faced the crowd. I did not come here looking for a fight, she said. I came to visit my brother, to pretend for a few days that I was someone ordinary, someone who had left the violence behind. She paused, but some things cannot be left behind. Some skills, some instincts, some parts of who we are, they stay with us whether we want them or not. For a long time, I saw that as a curse, a burden I could not escape. Her eyes found Toby. Now I am not so sure, because the same skills that haunt my dreams are the skills that kept my brother alive. The same instincts that remind me of everyone I have lost are the instincts that helped save the people standing in front of me now. She straightened. I cannot take credit for what happened here. Every soldier who held the line, who fought through fear, who refused to give up even when the odds were impossible, they're the reason this base still stands. I just did what I was trained to do. You did something harder. You chose to stand when you could have run. She touched the medal on her chest. This belongs to all of you. Every single one. The applause that followed was different. Not polite acknowledgement, but something deeper. Respect. Gratitude. The bond that forms between people who have faced death together and survived. After the ceremony, Ainsley pulled her aside. I meant what I said about making calls. Some people in Washington are very interested in you, Miss Kasongo. They have opportunities if you are willing to listen. Adrian shook her head. I appreciate that, Colonel, but I am done being a weapon. Ainsley studied her for a moment. Then what will you be? She looked across the base at the soldiers returning to their duties, at the walls being rebuilt, at the flag still flying despite everything. I'm not sure yet, but I think I would like to find out. The transport was scheduled for the following morning. Adrian spent her last evening at FOB Karasin walking the perimeter one final time, memorizing the mountains, the guard towers, the places where she had taken lives and saved them. Toby found her near the eastern wire, standing where the breach had been, now reinforced with fresh concrete and steel. You could stay, he said. Ainsley would find a place for you. Everyone would. I know, but I do not belong here, Toby. Not anymore. Then where do you belong? She considered the question. For 18 months, she had not had an answer. She had drifted rootless, running from a past she could not escape. But something had changed. The night of the attack, the moment she had picked up that rifle, she had stopped running. Not because she had found a new mission, but because she had finally faced the old one. I belong wherever I can help, she said finally. Maybe that is training others, teaching them what I know so they do not have to learn it the hard way. Maybe it is something else entirely. I do not have it figured out yet. Toby nodded slowly. Just promise me something. Anything. Do not disappear again. Whatever you do, wherever you go, stay in touch. I cannot lose you twice. Adrian pulled him into an embrace, holding tight, memorizing the feel of her brother in her arms. You will never lose me, she said. I promise. The next morning, she boarded the transport with the other civilians rotating out. Her bag was light. The metal was tucked inside, wrapped in cloth, a reminder of a night she would never forget. As the aircraft lifted off, she looked down at the base growing smaller beneath her. The mountains, the valley, the place where she had been forced to become herself again. She thought about Dawson and Rivera, and Chun and O'Yellerin, the four faces in the photograph, the four soldiers who had followed her and died. She had carried their ghosts for 18 months. Maybe she always would, but somewhere in the chaos of that night, she had realized something important. Carrying ghosts did not mean being haunted by them. It meant honoring them, living in a way that made their sacrifice mean something. She was not sure what came next. The future was uncertain, unwritten, full of possibilities she could not yet imagine. But for the first time in 18 months, Adrian Kasongo was not running from it. She was walking toward it. If this story moved you, drop a comment about what resonated most with you, or share if you have witnessed similar courage in real life. Let us know your favorite moment, your favorite character, or if you have ever seen someone reveal hidden strength when it mattered most.